After many months of waiting, we finally got our hands on Mazda's CX-5. For 2017, they decided to give their most popular crossover in America a very thorough refresh. Nearly every part of the CX-5 has been tweaked in some way for 2017, and therefore we do expect it to be exactly the same for the 2018 model year, with possibly a few tweaks in terms of pricing. In addition to the obvious tweaks like the new front end that you're looking at right there, the new interior, some additional gadgets inside the vehicle, we also have a vehicle structure that is more stiff than it was in last year. That means that it bends a little bit less when the vehicle is in off-camber situations. That means that the 2017 refresh of the CX-5 is more than just a new bumper up front and a new bumper out back like many manufacturers do. An interesting twist with this refresh, as we'll talk about later, is that Mazda has actually softened the suspension, because one of the complaints about the 2016 CX-5 was that the suspension could be a little bit too firm. Yes, you heard that right. Mazda has actually made the suspension a little bit softer for 2017. That's because Mazda's brand has long been associated with vehicles that are fun to drive, but that does not necessarily mean that they're the best handling or the fastest accelerating in every segment. And the CX-5 is a perfect example of that, and that's not a bad thing. That's actually a very good thing, because the CX-5 is still a lot of fun to drive, but it also ends up being one of the most practical and best balanced crossovers you can buy in America. And that's why I'm going to give the ending of my video away a little bit here right up front, because this is one of my top picks in the compact crossover segment. In my opinion, the CX-5 is the most attractive compact crossover in America. Be sure and let me know what you think about the design down there in the comments section below. For 2017, they took the front end from the CX-9 and basically fitted it onto the smaller CX-5. Now, the overall design themes were present in the 2016 and earlier CX-5, but the 2017 model has a definite refinement to the design. The large chrome bar starts just under this headlamp module over here and then continues along the bottom of the grille over to the other side, and the top of the grille, which was more or less one piece in the previous model, is now a separate piece and it's body colored. And then the whole grille has been tilted forward just a little bit to give this a more aggressive look overall. In the center of the grille, we have a large Mazda logo that hides the radar adaptive cruise control sensor in this model. Full LED headlamps are standard in every CX-5. If you opt for the top end trim, which is what we're driving, then these become adaptive full LED headlamps that steer in the corners. We also have LED fog lamps below. At 179.1 inches long, this is on the smaller side of the compact segment in America. This is a little bit larger than an Escape or a Tucson, and a little bit smaller than a CR-V. This is notably smaller than something like a RAV4 or a Nissan Rogue. From the side profile, you'll notice something very different than the other compact entries in America, and that's this long hood right up front. Obviously, some of this has to do with styling, but interestingly enough, some of this has to do with the way that Mazda has designed the exhaust manifold in their four-cylinder engine that needs a little bit more room up front. Of course, the side effect of the long nose proportion is that we get a little bit less room for the passenger and cargo area in the vehicle. Now, Mazda has prioritized passenger room, so we have passenger room that's very similar to the CR-V, but we have a cargo area that's about 25% smaller than the Honda. The rear end design hasn't changed too much for 2017. These tail lamp modules have light pipes in them that mirror the design of the headlamp module, and we have twin exhaust tips on the rear bumper. Under the hood, the two big changes for 2017 are that the base 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, which always felt a little bit underpowered, is now gone, as is the 6-speed manual transmission. That means that all models for a while will be getting this 2.5-liter 4-cylinder engine, producing 187 horsepower and 185 pound-feet of torque. That's a little bit more than we got last year. The 2.5-liter engine is mated only to a 6-speed automatic transmission, sending power to the front wheels or to all four if you choose that option. Fuel economy ranges between 26 miles per gallon for the all-wheel drive model and 27 if you choose front-wheel drive. Of course, the big news for the CX-5 in America is that we will finally see Mazda's Skyactiv diesel engine under this hood coming soon. Mazda tells us that by the fall of 2017, that 2.2-liter diesel will be on sale in America. It should produce around 175 horsepower and about 300 pound-feet of torque, although final details have yet to be released. You should expect highway fuel economy to come in right around 40 miles per gallon and combined fuel economy to be somewhere in the 30s. Choosing that diesel engine will move the CX-5 from one of the less efficient entries in the compact crossover segment to one of the most efficient entries, definitely rivaling the hybrid RAV4 or the hybrid Rogue. Although the majority of the interior in the CX-5 changed for 2017, the general design of the seats did not change up front. That means that base models still get a manual seat, mid-level trims get a partial power seat with a manual adjustable lumbar support, and the top-end trim that we're driving right here has power lumbar and 2-position memory. There's also a tilt telescopic steering column with a moderate range of motion, and we have a power passenger seat, but it is lacking the 2-way adjustable lumbar support. Moving to the back seat, that score jumps up to 10 out of 10 points. Headroom is class leading in the CX-5. I have about 2.5–3 inches of headroom sitting in the outboard seats, just a little bit less sitting in the middle seat, about 2 inches right there. You'll also find 80.4 inches of combined legroom in this vehicle, which means we actually have more legroom than the larger RAV4. Helping improve rear seat comfort, we now have a 2-stage recline mechanism that gives the seat about an inch of rearward motion. And we have doors that open a little bit wider than they did last year. Other nice touches back here are rear seats that fold completely flat. That's a change for 2017. In the 2016 model, they didn't get that flat, and it was more difficult to push cargo from the rear onto the seat back. And we also have a 40-20-40 folding seat back, so you can fold the center seat section down independently of the outboard sides. Of course, on this driver's side, if we pull the 40% side, it does take the 20% side with it. Rear seat passengers also get a fold-down center armrest with a storage cubby, 2 large cup holders, optional heated rear seats, and the seatbelt comes out of the seat back itself, not out of the ceiling, which is my preference, especially if you're going to put child seats in the back. Moving to the cargo area, you'll find 30.9 cubic feet of storage space back here, which is about 25% less than a RAV4 or CR-V. And that does make sense because this is shorter than a RAV4, but we actually have more interior room than a RAV4, and all that goes to the passengers. And that does mean that in our 24-inch roller bag score, this scores below the CR-V, the Rogue, or the RAV4. Under the load floor, we find a temporary spare tire and the subwoofer for the Bose Infotainment System right inside that spare tire as well. You'll notice another change for 2017 is that we have more carpet back here and thicker carpet to help reduce the sound. Perhaps the biggest change for the CX-5 happens inside the cabin. As we look around, keep in mind we are in the top-end trim, which is the Grand Touring, so we do have things in here that you won't see in the lower-end trims. However, all models do get height-adjustable seatbelts and 2-way adjustable headrests. The model that we're driving has this very attractive off-white leather interior. The leather is perforated, but there is no option for ventilated seats at this time. One of the big differences between the top-end Grand Touring trim that we're driving and the lower-end trims are the stitched dashboard and door panels that we're seeing right here. Unlike other mainstream vehicles where it's a little bit more common to see a traditional injection molded dashboard that is then after-stitched to give the impression of multiple pieces of material, these components are actually multiple pieces of material. The stitched components make up the upper section of the door right around the door handle, and then the lower portion right here around the armrest. We then have more traditional injection molded materials for other portions of the door. Moving over to the dashboard, we find a combination design with a stitched material in the sections that you can easily touch, and then a more traditional injection molded section above that. Unlike the CX-9, which features real wood trim, the trim in this vehicle is imitation. The glove compartment is medium-sized, and it's a bin variety that I was able to fit a tablet computer inside. In the center of the dashboard, we find essentially the same touchscreen infotainment system that we see in a variety of different Mazda models. This uses a combination input method, so you can either touch options on the touchscreen while you're parked, or you can use the rotary knob in the center console while you're driving. The software features optional factory navigation, and we're told to expect Apple CarPlay and Android Auto support integrated into this system coming soon. That will be via a software update that will be available to all owners of the CX-5 that have this particular system. It should also apply to previous generation Mazdas that use essentially the same infotainment and navigation system. That will be a welcome change because although the system is attractive and it's easy to use, there are some features that are a little bit behind the times. For instance, we have this HD radio traffic display here as a separate app. It's not overlaid onto the navigation database. Below the infotainment system, we find 2 large air vents, start-stop button for the engine, controls for the heated seats and the heated steering wheel, and then the controls for the 2-zone automatic climate control. Below the climate control, we have a storage cubby that does not have a lid. There's a 12-volt power outlet in there, and I can easily put my iPhone 7 in there for reference. Moving back from that, we have a very traditional console shifter. Drive is all the way to the back, manual mode over to the left. We press away from the driver for gear change down, pull towards the driver for gear change up, and then we have a drive mode button that allows us to select between normal and sport mode. Behind the shifter, we have the controller for the infotainment system. This is sort of like BMW's iDrive or Audi's MMI. We have a controller knob that rotates around, toggles side to side, and clicks down to enter. We then have direct access buttons for navigation, home, and the media interface, a back button, a favorites button, and then this knob over here is the volume and mute knob. To the left of that, we have auto brake hold and an electric parking brake. Between the front seats, we find 2 large cup holders and a padded armrest that opens to reveal a moderately sized storage area where we have 2 USB inputs, the mapping database for the infotainment system, a 12-volt outlet, and then some little cutouts so you can put cables right there and not have them pinched. On the driver's side, we find an instrument cluster very similar to other Mazda models with a tachometer on the left, a large central speedometer, and then a color multifunction display on the right. The multifunction display is controlled via a button on the steering wheel, and it allows us to cycle through things like our trip computer, service intervals, status of the safety systems, navigation turn-by-turn directions, and then of course inside this display you'll also find instant fuel economy right up top, and then a digital fuel gauge at the bottom. The steering wheel is the same 3-spoke design that we see in a few other Mazda models. We have some small sport grips right up top, and it's leather wrapped. On the right side of the wheel, we find the buttons for the cruise control system. We change the mode between radar adaptive and standard cruise control with this button, adjust the distance and the speed with those. On the left side of the wheel, we find the infotainment controls. We have dedicated phone buttons down here, volume up, down, track forward, backward, and then instead of toggling these switches, you can press them in for voice command or in to change that multifunction display's readout. One thing that hasn't really changed is the leisurely acceleration of the CX-5. It actually has become a little bit slower 0 to 60 than the 2016 model year vehicle, likely because this is a little bit heavier. Mazda added a considerable amount of sound deadening to the 2017 model, and that did add over 100 pounds of curb weight, helping this go from 0 to 60 in 8.1 seconds, which is about 0.4 of a second slower than the last model we tested. While this is faster 0 to 60 than a RAV4 or a Nissan Rogue, something like the Escape Turbo or the new Honda CR-V with its turbocharged engine are going to be notably quicker than this. Some of our Facebook fans were surprised to hear that this is one of the slower entries in the compact crossover group. However, that all has to do with the way that Mazda thinks about driving engagement and driving fun. Because fun to drive for Mazda does not necessarily mean best in acceleration or best in actual handling ability. It's about the fun to drive nature of the vehicle and the engagement that we find in the vehicle. That mission is obvious when we take a look not only at the acceleration score, but also the braking score, which at 125 feet from 60 miles an hour back to 0 is pretty average for a compact crossover. You'll definitely stop shorter in something like the Ford Escape or the Honda CR-V in the top level trims because those vehicles get wider tires, and that's one of the things that we don't see on the CX-5. All CX-5 models get 225 width tires. You will find 235s or even wider tires on some of the competition. And that's why when it comes to our handling score, I'm going to give this a B+, which is exactly the same score that we find in the Honda CR-V. Now the Honda CR-V holds the road a little bit better, so actual grip is going to be better in that Honda. You will go around the corner a little bit faster in that model. But it's not going to be as much fun while you're going around the corner because we get much more feedback from the road in the CX-5. It's a whole lot easier to tell what the front wheels are doing in this car. In addition to that, the steering in the CX-5 is a little bit quicker, it's a little bit more direct, and the overall experience is simply more fun. Now, I would be a liar if I told you that I didn't want more power under the hood and wider tires on all 4 corners, because I think that combination would make a truly excellent mainstream crossover. I really hope that Mazda finds it in their hearts to take that turbocharged engine out of the CX-9 and drop it under this hood, because it would make this car even more fun. As I've said before, it is important to remember Mazda's mission when creating these vehicles. They used to have the tagline Zoom Zoom, but I think part of the reason they changed it is that people didn't understand what Zoom Zoom was. Zoom Zoom is about fun, it's not about zip zip, so this is not going to be as speedy as something like even a Hyundai Tucson with its base turbo engine. Out on rougher roads like the gravel road that we're on now, the softer suspension for 2017 is obvious. I'm now going to give this an A when it comes to our ride score, because this version is better at soaking up bumps than the suspension design that we found in the 2016 model year. Now, Mazda didn't change too much in terms of overall substance. They just tweaked the design overall to make this a little bit more compliant at soaking up bumps. One thing that the CX-5 has always been known for is giving you a relatively stable ride, so we don't find too much body roll in this vehicle, even though we do get a little bit more bump absorption. Now, something like a Nissan Rogue is still going to give you the most compliant highway ride, but I think this suspension presents an excellent balance between handling ability and ride comfort. One of the reasons that the 2017 CX-5 is heavier than the 2016 model is the additional sound deadening we get in this car. They've put over 100 pounds of additional foam and carpet and other things in this vehicle to quiet the cabin down. And that is obvious because our cabin noise score at 50 miles an hour has now come in at 70 decibels, lower than the 2016 model year and just about equal to the brand new Honda CR-V. Over a week of very mixed driving, we've been averaging 26 miles per gallon in this front-wheel drive trim, which is just a little bit below what the EPA says we should get. Fuel economy in the CX-5 is pretty similar to the RAV4, but you will get notably better fuel economy in the Nissan Rogue or the CR-V thanks to their continuously variable transmissions. When you take a look at those scores at the top of your screen, my next statement may confuse you a little bit because the CX-5 is simply one of the most fun to drive compact crossovers in America. What may confuse some viewers is that the fun-to-drive nature of the CX-5 doesn't have to do with the acceleration time or the braking score or the absolute lateral grip in the CX-5. It has to do with the way the CX-5 is tuned and the feedback to the driver. Mazda has obviously spent a great deal of time tuning the steering and the suspension to give the most feedback possible to the driver. But they've also spent a great deal of time on the little things. The steering wheel is comfortable, the armrests on the door and the center console are at exactly the same height, and this car has one of the best heads-up displays that money can buy. This heads-up display is almost as good as the one that we see in BMW's latest models. It's bright, it's crisp, and it gives us an awful lot of information. It gives us road sign information, the speed that we're going, the cruise controls information, safety system information. It also repeats the blind spot information that we see in the side view mirrors in that heads-up display, making it more visible to the driver. Now obviously acceleration is not something you could fix aftermarket, but aftermarket you could definitely put wider and grippier tires on the CX-5, and that would make this one of the best handling compact crossovers in America. It's obvious when you take a look at Mazda's latest TV commercials that they're trying to position themselves as the premium mainstream brand. That does not mean that Mazda is trying to be another Buick or another Acura. Mazda seems to be trying a slightly different angle. I think that the interior and the exterior of the CX-5 are at least a half step above the Ford Escape, the Toyota RAV4, the Hyundai Tucson, the Kia Sportage, and even that brand new Volkswagen Tiguan. The repositioning of the CX-5 is obvious when you take a look at the price tag because it does become more expensive for 2017. The base price has gone up from $21,795 to $24,095. Now that may seem like a really big leap if you previously shopped for the CX-5, but it's really not that big of a jump because all Mazda has really done is kick the old 2-liter model with the manual transmission to the curb, so all models now start out with the 2.5-liter 4-cylinder engine and the 6-speed auto, and $24,000 is right where everybody else in this segment starts. This also helps put more distance between their smaller CX-3 and the larger CX-5. Other than the way this Mazda drives, the other thing that really impresses me about the CX-5 is the content that we find in the base model. Many manufacturers use a base model to give a very low sticker price in advertisements, but very few people would really be interested in the base model. And that's a little bit different in the CX-5 because this is, I think, one of the only base model vehicles that I could honestly recommend. The list of standard equipment in that base sport model is quite impressive. We get those 17-inch alloy wheels, 225 width tires, which are the same size tires you find on every model of CX-5. Now the wheels do get bigger as you go on up, but the width stays about the same. We also get that 7-inch infotainment system standard. Apple CarPlay and Android Auto will be offered on that 7-inch touchscreen LCD, and if you want factory navigation, you can add it aftermarket. All you have to do is go to the Mazda dealer, you buy the little SD card, and you stick it in your car, and it actually is a fairly inexpensive upgrade. In addition to that, cruise control, autonomous braking, keyless ignition, and dual exhaust are all standard on that base model. Of course, this week we were driving the top-end Grand Touring trim. It was almost fully loaded. It did not have all-wheel drive or the optional paint. Now let's see how the CX-5's price tag lines up with the 4 top sellers in this segment. You'll notice that the RAV4 is about $400 more expensive starting. That is the base trim of the RAV4, although we do get radar adaptive cruise control in that base model now. The price advantage of the Mazda continues on up the line because a fully loaded RAV4 would be about $2,000 more than the Mazda, and you actually don't find real leather inside that top-end RAV4. Perhaps the epitome of low base pricing is the $23,100 Chevy Equinox. The base L trim of the Equinox has absolutely no options available. You can only choose between 2 colors, and you can't get all-wheel drive, but all-wheel drive is available on all trims of the Mazda. Since we're talking about the Equinox already, let's dive right into the comparison section. The The Equinox is all new for 2018, and its price tag is all new as well. And you'll notice that it is between $2,000 and $6,000 more expensive than a comparable CX-5 all the way up the line. The price difference is largest if you're looking at the low-end models or at the high-end models. The more mainstream trims that most shoppers will be buying are a little bit closer, but they're still going to be about $2,500 more expensive on the Chevy dealer's lot. Now, General Motors does tend to offer greater discounts off MSRP than Mazda does, and those may level the playing field. However, it is difficult to talk about future discounts, and at this moment, the 2018 Equinox is typically selling right at MSRP. The Chevy is not as much fun to drive as the Mazda, but it does have absolutely excellent road holding thanks to its brand new platform design and the wide tires that we find in top-end trims. It also has a very large and accommodating cargo area. In addition to that, Chevy has a variety of engines to choose from. Base models start out with a small turbocharged engine. We have then an optional 2-liter turbocharged engine with a new 9-speed automatic, and we have a brand new 1.6-liter turbo diesel. The 1.6-liter turbo diesel is likely to be shipping before the 2.2-liter diesel that we will find in the CX-5 eventually. The new diesel engines in the Mazda and the Chevy mean that if you're looking for a very efficient compact crossover and you don't want a hybrid, we now have 2 options available. Next up, we have the popular Toyota RAV4. As I said before, acceleration is not the CX-5's strong suit, but the RAV4 is actually slower 0 to 60. Reliability is obviously a strong suit for the RAV4, as is a large and accommodating back seat and an enormous cargo area. The RAV4's cargo area is large enough that you may not fit that many more bags in the back of something like a Hyundai Santa Fe Sport, which is actually one size category up. On the downside, the RAV4 is getting a little bit old, and it definitely shows inside the cabin. The cabin is not nearly as premium as we see in the CX-5, whether we're taking a look at base trims or the top-end trims. Although Mazda has yet to release the software for Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, it is in theory coming for the CX-5, and Toyota has announced that they're not going to be adding it in the RAV4 at all. Toyota offers an optional hybrid system in the RAV4, which gives some of the best fuel economy in this segment, but the Mazda is more fun to drive and it's a better value. That's especially true if you're taking a look at top-end trims of the RAV4 or the CX-5, where the CX-5 is going to undercut the RAV by at least $2,000. For the moment, the Honda CR-V seems to be the benchmark in the compact crossover segment. The CR-V handles well. In fact, in some trims it handles better than the Mazda CX-5. We have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto in most models. You'll also find their advanced safety technologies and radar adaptive cruise control in very low-end trims as well. In addition to that, the interior is very, very well done in the latest CR-V. It's the closest competitor to the Mazda, although I think Mazda's interior is that next level above. If you get the turbocharged CR-V, then acceleration is brisk. If you don't get the turbocharged engine, then it's right around the same as the CX-5. Where things start to differ is the feel and the fun factor, because the CR-V may actually grip the road better and go from 0 to 60 faster than the CX-5, but it's not as much fun out on your favorite winding mountain road. But that said, the two models are very, very well matched, because what impresses me about the CX-5 and about the CR-V both is how very well balanced they are. They're both quiet, they're comfortable, they're reliable, and they're both surprisingly fun to drive for small crossovers. And it's obvious when you take a look at the features that we find in both of those vehicles that they're really pushing value hard. Last up, we have the Nissan Rogue, which is the best-selling compact crossover in America at the moment. It's not hard to see why. The Rogue is inexpensive, it's big, it's comfortable, and it's efficient. But the CVT and naturally aspirated engine are not exactly engaging, and that combination will take longer to get from 0 to 60 than the 2.5-liter engine we find in the CX-5. On the flip side, the cargo area in the Rogue is absolutely enormous, and it offers the segment's only optional third row. It's also an excellent buy, because the Rogue starts about the same price as the CX-5, and as you go on up the trim levels, it's going to end about the same price as well. In addition to that, Nissan tends to give greater discounts off MSRP. Again, it is tricky to talk about discounts, but you're likely going to find a Rogue for less than you would a comparable CX-5. When comparing the CX-5 and the Nissan Rogue, it really is all about practicality versus fun. The Rogue is bigger, it's a little bit more comfortable, it has that enormous cargo area, but it's not as engaging as the CX-5. And that takes us to our bottom line. As I indicated earlier, the CX-5 and the CR-V are my two top picks in the compact crossover segment. The CX-5 may not have the best horizontal grip or the best acceleration, but it has hands down, in my opinion, the best interior in this category and the most attractive front end. In addition to that, it is very well priced, very well featured, very easy to live with, and just a good buy all the way around. But that said, it's not exactly perfection. If you're looking for something with better fuel economy or a faster 0 to 60 time, you're going to have to look outside the Mazda portfolio. Personally, I think if Mazda were to drop a 2-liter turbocharged engine under the hood and put some 245 or 255 width tires on the CX-5, then they would have an excellent alternative to the Lexus NX200T or the Acura RDX with the interior that we already find in the CX-5. But as it is, that does not seem to be Mazda's mission with the CX-5. Instead, they're giving us an interior that I really think could go toe-to-toe with the Lexus or the Acura for the same kind of price tag we find on a Nissan Rogue. I suppose you could call that premium mainstream, which has kind of a nice ring to it. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2017 CX-5. Be sure and click the subscribe button down there at the bottom of your screen if you haven't already done so. Find us over at facebook.com/AlexandAutos so you can be updated on all the cars we're driving this week. And you can also head over to patreon.com if you want to support this channel, and I hope you do. I'll see you next week.